Hello everyone and welcome to Handmade Hero Show. We code a complete game live on stream. This is going to be, we're kind of at the point where there's just tons of things to do. I was talking about this in the pre-stream. We don't really know exactly what we're doing today because we got tons of stuff we could do on the game now. Pretty much everything is available. We've got some bugs we can look at. We've got a bunch of features we can start adding now. There's tons of things we can do. And so one of the things that I think maybe I'll start with, because it's sort of what we had been working on a little bit beforehand, is like getting the camera back into a place where all of the features that I want are in there. In fact, I shouldn't say getting it back to a place. I should say getting it to a place, because we never really had all the features I wanted. Oops, that's the render test. Let me load up Handmade here. And so, yeah, if you take a look at what we did with the camera, you can hop around now, and we totally fixed all of the problems with the camera interpolation being incorrect from frame to frame. We had just written it poorly the first time. I think we didn't really think it through right or something. I don't know what happened. It was very simple when I went back and looked at it. I was just like, oh, we just have some very simple stuff to do. And so I would like now to go in and, because the camera is working nicely in this, for the interpolation, I would like to maybe say, like, let's continue going on with the camera. And let's try to get the camera to a place where it's like, it maybe isn't shippable because we don't know exactly what we need in its entirety for shipping, but an arguably shippable camera, meaning it doesn't have obvious problems. So for example, let's get scrolling in there. Like, I shouldn't be able to do that. Right, this was a room that was supposed to scroll, and we never added scrolling to the camera. So let's get scrolling working. Let's also make it so that, for example, we've got our specials working nicely and our room highlighting working nicely. So for example, let's say I go up and hop on this square. Maybe it zooms in when I'm talking. If this is a talk to this person square, for example, let's make it so we can do a zoom in on that. So stuff like that, that's what I'm looking for. And then finally, and very importantly, as we go to start working on our, polishing up how the art is rendered and so on, we're going to want to work on our Z-bias stuff and our sprite layering and all that kind of stuff. As we're polishing that up, we need that debug camera to be back. And right now, the debug camera is not there, right? We don't have a debug camera set up right now. And so we need some way of doing that. And as far as the debug camera is concerned, I don't know if I really like the way that it works right now. It's a little weird. I've had it for this whole time on, you right click the button and it went into debug camera mode, and it was weird. It stored a separate thing. So I think we also want to, in addition to implementing sort of like a good debug camera where we can move all around and focus on whatever we want, I think we also want some kind of a feature that some kind of a good idea of how we get in and out of it, and what it's supposed to do. So we'll kind of talk about that a little bit and figure out what we actually want there, and how we want that to work. So let's try to figure out scrolling, for example. For scrolling, I think what we want to do is maybe think about just setting the location of the camera based on the position of the entity that it is following. And so, if we look at where the camera is, update camera for entity movement in this code here, I'll move it over here so it's not behind my head. One of the things you can see is in here we talk about the room that we found that we're inside, and you can kind of see that happening here. And if we look at that room function, what we kind of see here is that we set the target P of the camera based on where the room center is. And I think what we want to do here is specify some idea about what the maximum size of a room is that we want to focus on. And then if the room is any bigger than that size, then we actually take the center of a subroom size that can slide around inside the larger room, right? So we're just saying, look, we know that rooms are any size we want. Like, we want the game to be able to generate any size room, where room in this case can be anything, really. And so we want there to be a notion of like free roaming or not. And so there's, now that I think about it too, another way to look at it would be the room itself could also tell us that. So if we wanted to set it into sort of a free scrolling mode, maybe that just is the way it is. And let's look at what would happen if we did that, because I don't really know if I like that or not. And so it might be interesting to kind of see what would happen there. So for example, if we look in here, we've got this this entity coming in. You know what I mean? And that's like, here's the person you're following. And so in here we kind of pull out and say, oh, well, we've got the simulation center and so on, blah, blah, blah. If we were going to follow an entity directly, what would we do? And if we look here, the target P, for example, we've got this target offset Z and the camera Z, right? The target offset Z could remain set for the room. But what we could do is say, in the case where we're scrolling, right? If we were scrolling, and, special camera maybe is, maybe even special camera could be, oh, you know what? It looks like we already do this. Camera view player. There you go. So it looks like when we create this room, we can set up a special camera that's, intentionally set up to handle this. If we just set that, we would scroll. So let's see what that looks like. So if we set view player up inside the gen room code, here's our room creation. And when we set this up, we've got the ability to set these flags, right? So you can see here, we've got camera behavior as a thing that we can set. And so if we want to, we could say like cam room, camera behavior equals something. And so when we actually specify this stuff, it seems like we would want to say, well, when we say get camera offset Z for dim, we might want to say like that this function here can look and see if the thing is bigger, if the X count gets up above a certain amount, which is whatever we can actually find. Maybe we set some flags here to say what that should be, what it should do. Something like this. And so we could just say, all right, set the camera behavior here in that case. And so when you go generating a room of this size, we would just say like, oh, or in that special behavior, the like, view player. And so in either of those two, we'd just say, look, follow the player along. I think we actually want a view player X and a view player Y as separate. So I don't really think we want to do it exactly that way. But let's just see what that does at first. Make sure that code is actually like working at all. And so if I hop out here and I leave, yeah. So you can see now, like I'm able to kind of like, I can smoothly hop around and it will follow me. It's a little bit bad because it's actually like following the hop. And so we probably don't, we don't really want exactly what this is doing, which is following with no hysteresis. Like, so we want a way to make this a little more stable. I'm guessing than it is, right? Because that nonlinear movement is not going to be fabulous. It's just a little nauseating in my opinion. So we'd like it more stable than that, but that's basically the right thing. And we probably want here also to say, well, like I said, we want X and Y, so like a hallway can be tracked along Y and not X or vice versa. So, you know, I think we probably want something like this, where we're just saying like, take specific elements and use those. Don't scroll or not scroll. Scroll or not scroll based on a particular, like a specific axis that you're looking for. So here's the camera behavior. So if I do a view player X and a view player Y instead, I'm just gonna change these flags here. That seems like better, right? So there we go. We're already set up inside RoomGen to deal with that because you can see we were already checking the X count and the Y count anyway. So it seems like that's what we want. We may also want it to be tracked earlier than that. Like the 13 might be already something where we want to scroll it. I'm not entirely sure. But let's say we come out here, right? You know, this kind of wants to scroll. How big is that room? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So that's actually, wow, okay, so I guess these are just kind of not really quite as far out as they probably should have been. I don't really know what I want to do here. I'm not sure what we want that ramp to be. I also don't know why we did this way, but I guess it's because they're sort of different levels of zoom. Just gonna play around with this a little bit and see. We also already had a multiplier in there. I do think maybe we want to be able to be further out than that. So I'm actually fine with that. I'm going to continue boosting these numbers a little here. We probably want to tune each of these, I'm guessing, eventually, to be pretty specific. That seems better. And the thing I like about this is this would allow us to create large open areas where the player can freely move around and that aren't room-based. And so we would have the freedom to do both things, right? We can have room, because I want room-based encounters where like the doors lock, you know, in standard fashion. And so it's kind of nice, like this feels really good, actually. When you come out to the hallway, you know, you're moving kind of through here, and then when you come into rooms that are shorter, it locks in on it. And that feels like really good. And here it feels good too to be locked in the center, but you know, but you don't actually have a locked vertical, so it can scroll. You know what I mean? So that actually feels pretty good too. So the only thing I would say is that it seems like I don't know how many across we really want to have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So it might be something where the x distance is a little less than I was saying. Maybe it's more like this. This dude is super in our way right here. I'm going to say that the main hall can't have a person in it until we fix that. So if you look at what we were doing there, inside Create Orphanage, right? We allowed things to be placed in various rooms, and we said that the main room could have an orphan placed in it. And then it went ahead and placed an orphan in the doorway, because we don't really have any intelligent placement code. It just starts looking for empty squares and puts things in there, and so that blocked our entrance, right? So now, like, the main room there, yeah, you can tell that works really nicely too. See, it scrolls in Y, right? Just like it should. And we can hop in here, and then it kind of zooms in on that area. And then we're outside now, and I can walk around through there. And you can see one really interesting thing, like I was saying, one of the things I really like about this is as I'm hopping around here, I'm actually crossing a room boundary there. So this is actually 2 rooms, but they're seamless as far as it would appear, because when we set the scrolling to be arbitrary like that, you can just hop around a non-room based world. So even though we can create things still thinking in terms of rooms, because that's how we like to do it in the code, for like placing different elements and welding them together and all that, we don't actually have to do that as far as like we don't have to actually do that as far as like outdoor regions appear to the player. They can feel like they're large open expanses if we want, right? Now, what we want to do in terms of rendering stuff that's below us is still pretty tricky, right? If we look at how much stuff is on the screen right now, it's quite a bit. And, in the future, there wouldn't probably be a lot of that. I mean, maybe if there was a cliff or something, but generally speaking, you only kind of really see like if there's a hole down to the next level or something there. But yeah, like if we look and just say what's our damage here, like how bad is the situation? What you can kind of see is that like let's look at our thread view, right? You can see that it's all just the lighting. So really, if we just, and maybe we need to back off on our lighting complexity too and just do simpler stuff, who knows. But if you look at what's going on there, if we just weren't lighting, we wouldn't really have a problem still, even with stuff like this where there's tons of things in here. And so, as Entity Sim gets added to the mix, we're going to have to do some better work to make sure that stays optimal. But that's not that hard. That's going to be pretty easy, I think. So my opinion there is that like we just have to address the lighting and make the lighting do the right thing there. You know what I mean? And I think that's most of what we got to do. We certainly can shoot less rays, right? Like, we can always make the lighting crappier for the moment or something. But, we really need to just come up with a better solution to the lighting long term. And I'm not sure what that is. And it may require moving it to a GPU-based solution as well. I really couldn't tell you. So here's where we're doing our ray count, and we're sending 16 of those. So I'm wondering like what happens if we just do super crappy lighting for now, just to avoid having any problems with speed based on lighting. It would look horrible, right? It's super flickery. But then we don't really have any issues with the frame timing anymore, and we can make that larger. It looks like a disco, doesn't it, kind of? It's like disco time. Discotheque. Pun intended. So yeah, I mean, we just really need to get better lighting solutions in there, and I don't know exactly what that, you know, will entail, but something better than we've got, because again, like, we're not even simulating the lighting all the way. Like you can see, we're kind of getting that, like, we would have to simulate the lighting all out through there if we wanted to draw this, and it's just way, we just don't have the capability of doing that, you know. And so that's really, you know, that's really our issue, and I don't know when we're gonna address that or how. Excuse me. So let's figure this out here. Let's do a couple things. Let's go in and make our room gen also allow us to access everywhere in the game at the moment. Like right now, for example, we don't have, like, there are transition points that we don't properly handle, like we don't handle boundaries going downward. You know what I mean? So the connection system here, it just, all it does is say we don't, you know, we're going to not put a wall if there was supposed to be a boundary connection there. But we don't actually have a way of doing if we were supposed to go down. And so in the case where a connection goes down, I would like to put in a stairwell. So like when we did that, and granted this code is, you know, I haven't worked on it much, so it's kind of janky, but when we actually place the room along the edges, we do have the up and down concept in there. So, you know, we do have a way of saying that should happen. And it is being picked. And then when we create one of those deltas, like when we create the connection, we check to see if it's, I guess, we check to see whether, yeah, we're really not doing anything particularly interesting here. We just check to see where we're gonna connect, and then we connect. For Z, here it is. We say intersect these two volumes, then take the halfway point between them, right? So it would have been placed in the middle of the room if there was a downward thing. And so I don't know exactly how I want that to work, but I guess like, I mean, I guess I want a hole there. So in here, I'm thinking we kind of want this to be expanded. For when we do a connection, we would like it to be expanded by 1 all the way around. I want to do, and we had this in there before. So when we create this entity and we take the visible piece, we've got this color setting, right? And we set them all to something arbitrary here, but I'm gonna turn that off so that we can see like essentially a color coding of what everything in the world is. Walls and floors and connections and so on. And so I think that if I do that and I come out to the outside here, we should be able to see when we get to the place where these are connected, we should be able to see the connection, and we can, right? So here's that room, and you know, there's a connection, I believe, and there's the connection between these two rooms. So I think that's like the down, you know, the passageway that goes down. And there's a few things about stairwells that make them a little bit tricky. Well, there's a few things about this in general that make it tricky. So I don't really know what we want to have for stairwells in general. I suspect we want stairwells to be like any other door. You go up or down in them and it's fine. I don't know if we want the concept of falling through something, but either way, if we want to have two, like an up and a down connection that's on the same room, we would have to be careful so that the stairwells don't like overlap each other in some kind of bad way or things like that. But I don't know. I mean, so anyway, if we were going to put in a stairwell, it needs to be a little bit more thoughtfully arranged. And maybe, you know, I guess what I'm saying is when I actually go to place one of these stairwells, I think maybe what I would want to do is hollow out the stuff around it. So when we actually create one of the downward connections, like I might want to say something like, if this is an up or a down connection, meaning, you know, like if it's a box index up or a box index down kind of a thing, I might want to have essentially a way to do like a Minkowski sum on here, essentially to expand it out, just to grow it a little bit, so it's like a little bit bigger and occupies more area. So for example, like maybe I would say something like, you know, add radius here. And in most cases, you don't have any add radius, so the connection most of the time doesn't do anything. But in the case of an add radius here, we would do, you know, that. So up and down connections would grow by a certain amount. So after you create what the door would be, we would say add radius to, and we would say, you know, that. Now, I don't know that we have an add radius 2 for these, because I think these are these are rectangle 3s that don't have, they need to implement sort of non-floating point versions of what we were doing with rectangles before. So I think in terms of the world gen, you know, I think there's a rectangle type that we use in here. I don't remember what it is though. Where's door? Gen volume. I don't know where gen volume is. So gen volume is in gen math. And you can see that it's got some basics here, but doesn't have the ability to add, right? So if I just have a gen volume add radius 2, and I've got, I guess I would need to actually pass this in as sort of a gen, like it's a gen v3, right? Here's the radius. And so in here it's pretty simple. Here's the results. It just equals whatever this is. I guess we're doing this like this. So when we pass this in, we would just say, okay, the result in this case is going to get expanded in exactly this way. So the min 0 equals the radius is 0, right? Oops, minus. And then the max has the same thing. So it just puffs it by that much. All right. So to create one of those Gen v3s, I don't remember what we've got for that. Looks like we would want something like this. So here I can say that. And this is really just a, a simple utility function to make sure those can be bundled together. So I think that's all we would really need there. And so in here we would say that add radius function is a gen v3. And in here we would just say, okay, set it that way. So that's all I'm really talking about there. I don't think we need to do anything else to it other than that. And I'm going to go ahead and run the code now and make sure that that created a larger door for me. Oops. Why did I accidentally set the... I did. All right. So going up here now, again, I should be able to verify that the... I should be able to verify that the location here is now large. See how it's like a square now? You know what I mean? And so I want that to be, I would like that square to be the downward motion. Now, one thing is it's not centered. It looks like it added it. For some reason, it looks like it's shifted backwards a bit. I don't know if that may be because of where it shows to align them in terms of where the underlying level is. So I guess I don't really know that that's wrong, but when we play with the generator more seriously later, we'll have to make sure that's actually something that happened correctly. I'm not sure if it actually is or not. So what I would like to do now is just have some way inside the room generator of detecting whether you're on a stairwell or not. And so, I need some way of looking at one of these connections and knowing that it is or isn't a downward connection. So the dir mask, I assume, the dir mask, though, so looking at this, the dir mask is just going to tell us which ways it could have connected, but it's not going to tell us necessarily which way it did connect, I don't think. I don't know if we update that to actually say which direction it goes. So when we finalize a connection, do we set that? Not really. You can see us doing the room connection here. You can see us saying, get the other room. It's basically saying if the other room is placed, then we can place us. And if you could go the direction, then it looks like you kind of do. And so then we do this place room. It seems like at that point we want to lock the connection down to the direction it actually went, so we can say, look, this is the way this direction went. And I guess I don't know. Hmm. I guess I don't really know what I want to do there. But it seems like in here, so here's what I guess I would say. Inside world gen, we've got gen room connection, and it seems like that's probably where I want to put that. So essentially what I'd want to say is we've got the directions in that box thing. So we've got like the west, east, north, south, up and down, you know? And so it seems like I want to say, which direction is this going? So in gen room connection, we would say like placed direction or something. And when we actually put something down, we would shove into the room connection the direction it actually went, right? So we would say something like, okay, you know, when we do could go direction and we pass it, you know, this nonsense here, and we do the like get dir mass from room and the result equals dir mass times test mass. So there's like the test mass there. And we get the surface mass from the dim in the side that gets passed in here, right? We want to then write this back in. So this here is the direction mask. I guess I really just want just the direction though. I don't really want this. You know what I mean? So what I really want to know is what's the surface index. So I want this, right? So I think what I want to do here is say, like, look, if we placed this room, we know that we placed it along a particular connection, a particular room connection. And so we want to actually go back and rewrite that room connection. So you get this room con here, right, is the thing we're looking at. So we want to actually take room con, and when we place the room, we want to set room con's placed direction. We want that to be equal to the surface index value in question, right? So like dim inside. And that should be one of those box index things. You know what I mean? It's one of these. Why it doesn't return one of those, I'm not sure. Seems a bit weird, but. The only thing that doesn't really work here is that the opposite side of our room, so the room that we branched off from, we don't actually know who, we'd never looked at the room connection on that room, and we didn't do the opposite one of these. So we really need to do like other room con once we've placed it, like it's the other way around. And it's not negative side because I think side is just 0 and 1. So it's really not side here. So it's like we whatever the other thing of side is, because side is either 0 or it's 1. So it's, you know. It's that. I don't know if we've got a function to do that already. We probably should. So there should probably be a function in here that's like it's interesting that surface index is an S32, but mask is a U32. Not sure why that would be. But anyway, this is that. You know what I mean? So the problem now that we have is just how do we, how do we talk about that other room? How do we get the other room connection? And so, if we look at what we've got here, there's a bunch of stuff going on. Like here's how we add those in, right? And here's how we connect them, right? We create all of these. And so what we don't really have anywhere here is something, you can see us even here, we will look at like the connection and get the other room. What we don't have is something that spins over the connections to find the one that goes to a particular room. Right, you can see we don't really have anything in here that wants to do that. So we never get there. We never get to that type of state. But it's pretty easy, right? So if we go to get other room here, and we just have something that's like get room connection, and we say, all right, from this room to this other room, get me the connection that was linking them together. That's a pretty easy thing to do because either there is or there isn't one, and we just have to loop over and see whether there is. So we would just say, okay, here's the test connection. We would do from room first, room connection. Test equals test next. And then in here we would say, well, if this test, and we've got inside the definition here, for each one of these room connections, right? We've got the gen connection and then the next value there. So for each one of these things, we would just say, if the test connections has the to room in it, then we're good. Then we're good to go, right? So we can just do it this way. And that's really it. So that allows us to get from a room to the connection, like which connection would have linked it to some other room that we know it's connected to. So when we're inside WorldGen and we're placing rooms now, when we do that room placement here, we can get the other room connection pretty easily. Because now we know once we've placed it, we can say, here's the room that we placed. We know we want to be going to this other room, right? And it's specified already because we've done this work here, where we've picked out what that other room actually is already. So I should be able to just say other room. And once I've got that, we're done. Now, that's actually constant throughout the routine, so assuming that we want to actually make that happen, we should be able to do this. You know what I mean? And I think that's it. So at that point, we can now set these so that each person knows what direction they're going, and they can look at their side of the link to see which direction the exit is for them. I don't remember which way these go, but I think we're talking about the opposite way, so I think I've got the sides reversed there, potentially. Sorry, I need to stretch. There we go. So in here, for example, when we say, could I go this direction, here's the connection, here's the other room, and here's the side. So that's the direction I would be going from this room, I assume. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, that means that this and this are like backwards, right? Like side is actually talking about which way we would go from the other room, not us. So I think this is the way that they're getting used. Side is how we would be coming from the other room to us, not how we would go from us to the other room. But I don't know. We'll double check that because there's a lot of information flowing in here, and it'd be easy for me to get that wrong. I guess I could look at this and see. It says that the connections door at, which is the max value. The max value is going to be the minimum of our room if it is positive. And it's going to be the minimum of the other room if it's the negative direction. Is that right? So if we were going this way, right, if we were going if we were going to the left, then we're saying that we would use their minimum as the maximum value of the door. And if we were going to the right, then we would use our minimum as the maximum value. So yes, the side appears to be saying, if I was going from the other room, it's that direction. That's what it seems to be saying. Inside box, I want to know why this get surface index. Why isn't get surface index returning a box surface index? I want to know, like, what would be the problem if I did that. Can someone tell me? Because I don't see why, I don't know why it was that way. So I think it should be that way because that is a known indexable value. And if you wanted to stick it into U32, you could just go right ahead. But we know it's coming out as one of those, and we've asserted it as well, so we kind of know what we're guaranteeing to the external code. So I feel like calling it a box surface index makes perfect sense. All right, so now inside RoomGen, we have a lot more information. We should in here be able to say, like, you know, this is a stairwell. And in here, I could say, like, stairwell equals roomcon place direction equals box up or down. And now we would know if there's a stairwell. I just don't want to place anything, probably, at the moment. So if it's not a stairwell, so I'm going to, like, if this whole block out. We would do well to have a way of remembering our last position and just starting there. You know what I mean? Because it's going to get really tiresome if we want to debug things in the generator to, like, have to hop all the way out every time. You know what I mean? Like, I have to do that whole hop and, like, it didn't work, right? And so now I got to hop out here every time. So I feel like that would be a nice feature to have as well. Like, I feel like we would want something like this thing right here. So if we imagined having a magical camera editor, which I think we can all imagine, and I wanted to just have, like, you know, this, something like this, you know what I mean? You know, I don't know what that should look like exactly, but you know, but something like that, it would be cool. And so let's just put some stuff in there as a reminder that we want this, and then maybe I'll do it. Seems plausible, right? So maybe in here we have like dev mode, what did I call it? Maybe something like that. And so maybe that's the F2 key actually, and editing assets is maybe the F4 key or something. I don't know. Trying to think of what else we want there. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so if we imagined we had some magical camera editor thing there, then that would be cool. And we could bind that to an F key so it's easy to get to as like a quick access situation. And so, you know, something like this. That's weird. Wonder why it's having trouble getting a asset ID. All right, maybe not. So for some reason, dev mode camera didn't show me anything. Why not? We should come down here to camera editor. Oh, right, we've got sort of a you know, is it an editor function thing that happens here? Would be nice to just bracket that. And I suppose I could. I suppose I could do something like this. If I wanted to. It's not the prettiest thing in the world, but it would work. And then we'd just say this. So yeah. And I guess in some sense too, this stuff can kind of be moved a little bit into, because we don't really have undo and redo for the camera per se, although maybe we will want to. That's kind of a little bit weirder. But in terms of the asset editor, as far as, yeah, like you just look at some of this stuff and I'm like, gosh, which sort of stuff should this be? So I'm kind of thinking maybe what I did there was kind of dumb. Maybe we actually don't want that at the moment anyway. You know, maybe we do want to do that just for editing assets. And then the camera is actually, we wouldn't do that here. You know, it would be here. Or something along those lines. I mean, it can't quite do that because yeah, gosh, I really don't know what the right way to do that is. I guess I'll keep it the way it was. Because I could imagine putting in undo for the camera, you know? we go. All right. So if we do it like this, all I really want to do here is say, well, the HHA stuff probably needs to go down into the asset editor, though, right? Because that stuff is not applicable in this case. So that would want to go in here, I think. Like so. And some of these things that are were actually down here probably want to get moved up, because they're kind of more generally applicable. And then, yeah, so I don't know exactly what we want to do there. Save all changes. All right. See how that goes. So now we should be able to have like a camera UI there, which I really don't know what exactly we're going to do with, but we're going to do something with it probably. So that's the camera, that's the editor, the HHA editing, right? And you know, we may want to kind of break that out too, so that like the HHA stuff has two things, like I don't know. We got a lot of work we could do on the editor to make that better. But I'm just saying I want to remind myself that I want some of this here so we can save and load our startup locations easily, so that we don't have to hop all the way out there every time, because that's going to get old real quick. So that needs to happen when we do the camera stuff. So inside here, I want to know why I didn't get a stairwell. Like, I want to know why this didn't happen. And because we sort of know, we know that this must have been happening because we were getting that color change, right? So we had to have been on a connection, or we wouldn't have been getting the color change that we were seeing here. And so the fact that it's not selecting this, we must be getting this hit properly, but for some reason the stairwell term is never evaluating, right? But we should be evaluating it, and I don't know why we're not. When we go look at WorldGen here, and we see what we were setting it to, so when we do our getBox surface index, we use dimension here, and it's the direction we're going, right? It is the direction the connection is going. So it should evaluate to box index up or box index down, I would argue. It doesn't appear to be, or something else is happening, but because there's enough stuff going on in that code, I'm not going to try and guess what's wrong. I'm just going to step into it and see if there's something I can see in there that lets me know what we did wrong. So inside WorldGen, what I'm going to look for is when we go to lay out that room, there is a clear-cut case when we do this. So I'm just going to say, let's look at the downward directional one and the upward directional one. We know that those should both produce a result that has box index up or down set, and we're not getting either of those working properly. So let's see why. So when we set one of those and we come through here, we should be able to place the room in theory, right? It looks like here we did. Yeah. So we place the room along the edge here. Oh. Wait, so we have two ways that we place the room? Whoa. So we have a place room and a place room along edge. And I guess place room along edge. Hold on a second. So that explains it. We have a place room in volume, which just puts a room somewhere. We have a place room along edge. But it looks like we actually don't ever call a place room. So that's why. This was just in the wrong code. Right? It needed to be in place room along edge. So here's our place room along edge code. Because remember, we were playing with different ways of placing rooms, so we only actually ever use this one. So when we do add radius 2, here's where we would actually need to do the work of placing one of these things. When we get here, we know a couple things. So we know the connection. And we do know... So we do know the direction we're going. So it seems like everything's fine. So in here, it does seem like if we got the two connections, we would be okay. So the room's place direction and the other room's place direction, right? They're going to be these. We need to know which direction we were going. And looking at the relative x-axis here and that stuff, it looks like that would tell us what the direction we were talking about was going to be. All right, so rel z-axis is the axis of travel. You can see that here because we do max door and min door, right? These are not directions of travel. They are just, you know, the where along the edge you are. So it looks like we should be able to say, like, rel z-axis is the axis in question here. And then the sidedness of it for min door and max door, I'm not sure. It doesn't look like we know that. Like, all we do here is we just intersect the two volumes to find out where they should go. To be completely honest with you, since room volumes don't overlap, why does intersect get called there? That doesn't make any sense. Shouldn't that produce nothing? Like, shouldn't the intersection be, for the min and max of the door, it should be nothing, right? That doesn't make any sense. So if I have two room volumes and I intersect them, and then I get, and then I get an actual volume back for the door, I have no idea why that would happen. The intersection along that's just puzzling. So I would like to see what's going on there. I got no idea how we wrote that. So what happens in intersect? It does exactly what you would expect. And presumably these rooms are non-overlapping. So when you get that back, you should get nothing. So when you set the door min and door max, it flips it. Perfect. Wow, we were clever. I'm like, why did we do that? That makes perfect sense. I thought I looked for that. I was like, maybe they flip it, and then I thought they didn't, but they do. Okay. So that's all good. So the fact that we flip it there, again, means that, so we don't really know what direction we're going, is the problem. So we must have that information up here. So in the surface index where we're doing this, like, you know, rel z-axis min is the thing that tells us which direction we're going, it looks like. And I think we don't get any other information. So in the case where we're going from the base room, and we're going from the base room to us, right? Then if we're going west, then that would be negative. So min, rel z-axis min is actually the one for us, it looks like. So it looks like it's this. That appears to be the case. So we'll have to double check that. But what we now need is these two room connections, because I don't think we have any room connections here. Yeah, we don't. So what we need to do is we need to call this function get room connection to, and we're going to have to use that to generate these two. So, you know, we're going to have to do room con, I guess I shouldn't delete that, and other room con. And so for the room con, that's us, we need to do from our room to the base room, and then we need the opposite. And we need both of those, and then we can set their place to directions. So I think that's what we need there, and we should be good to go in theory, but I don't actually know. It helps to edit the right function, right? It's not surprising that we didn't get what we wanted when we didn't actually edit the right function. So let's go ahead and move out there and see what's up. So now we have the, you know, the hole there. That's what I wanted. And I want to be able to like go down, right? I want to be able to go down to the lower level stuff. And so what I was gonna do here is just place some stairs in there when you were inside the doorway. I don't know how useful that's gonna really be, but we'll see. So I'm gonna get rid of this now, and put this back in there. And I'm gonna look and say, well, I probably don't want to place people on stairwells for the moment. So I'm going to prevent you from adding things to the stairwell. But I am going to look here and say, okay, if it's something that it should have been on a stair, then I'm gonna move it down, you know? So on here we say like wall height, blah, 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 right? And we're putting the P offset in there. I want this to actually be done differently. So, you know, if it's a stairwell, it's one thing. Otherwise, it's another thing, you know? And so the stairwells, I think I'll do where we have, we probably still want the unilateral in here maybe. You know, maybe I even do that, and then I'll say, okay, if it's a stairwell, I'm gonna do some nonsense here. So I'm gonna like move it down by some proportion to where it is in the stair. So like there's a T stair value, and I'm gonna move it down based on like what your T stair value is or something. And so, you know, we'll move it up to 1 meter downward or 2 meters downward. I don't remember what our floor to floor distances even are in the world, because it's been a while. Like, what's the floor height? So abs tile Z gets modified by the tile dim. So it actually is set up in here, right? Like we're actually setting it up here. It's tile depth in meters, so it's a 1.4. So, you know, that's the most you would go downward. And so T-stair probably wants to top out before 1. So, you know, in here we would say, all right, the stairwell thing, if it is a stairwell, the T-stair is going to take... and I could even do this. In here, we're going to say T-stair equals 0. And we would say that the T-stair equals, you know, this in this volume, we can map ourselves into it. So we can essentially say, well, the tile Y value, you know, that we are, minus the minimum Y of that, divided by the Y range, is what we need for our T value, right? So if I said, you know, here's the Y range, maybe I'll keep that caps. That's just the convol max Y minus the convol min Y, and off you go. Should F32 that. Okay. Left of dot Y. Oh, so volumes are dim, aren't they? So this is actually easier. It's just this. Right? What's the problem here? So the volume has a min and a max. Oh, so I see. So it's just... I will say having a dim there seems pretty weird. We don't actually ever store the dim. It's just min and max. So shouldn't that just be E? Probably. That's a pretty weird way to write that. If you ask me. I also don't know why these aren't Gen V3s. Like, shouldn't this be this? I mean, that's how you should do it. And this seems bad. Let's fix that. So everywhere in here, I'm just going to do like min x is going to be min.x. Min maxx is going to be max.x. Min y is going to be min.y. Oops. Okay. Max y is going to be max.y. And max z. I guess I forgot min z. All right, so let's see what else we got here. Min y is min.y. What the? I keep hitting the T button, which opens the to-do thing. I wish that didn't work inside there. Hold on a second. I gotta make that not work inside there because it happens to me all the time. Min y equals min.y. Okay. All right, so in here, these are just gonna be dot e's. So like if you have a min bracket, it's just a min.e bracket. You know what I mean? And then if you have a max bracket, it's just a max.e bracket. So now those are accessible properly. And they match the way we do our vectors, which is what I wanted. So again, max in this case is that. And min is the same. So all right. I'd also like to get rid of dim, so we'll do that at some point here. I really wish I had the way to just like all the replacements I just did in the other file. I want to execute them now, right? And I've been waiting to update my forecoder till we have the ability to use jump, and it's almost there, but it's not quite there yet. And so I'm hoping that happens soon because there's a lot of features that I kind of want to add, and I just have been putting it off because I want them to be based around having a jump ability, which doesn't quite work yet. And so I don't know when the next forecoder's coming, but I'm hoping it's soon. Oops. Had those capitalized wrong. So I think we're good now. And so this part here, like the dim, again, just it seems really weird. And so that, I feel like there must be some reason we did that, and I want to make sure we don't keep doing that. So I'm going to delete that. So yeah, we'll see. So I want to, let me make sure I didn't destroy everything by doing that. Okay. So I want to go in here, and I don't really want that dim value in there because I feel like that would be easy to make a mistake. This should just be an E, right? That's how we've been doing it. So you just access the elements if you want. So that dim value, okay, so no one was using it, so that's good. So this is really what it should have looked like. And furthermore, once it looks like that, right, it should just look like this. And the same is true up here. There's no need for the extra level. All right. So now we should be basically done with that. And I just wanted to make it so we could hop around down there. So like I said, as we start to work on the camera more, we need to be able to check what happens if you go downward or upward. And so I wanted some way of doing that. You can see it sort of goes down a little bit there, but not quite enough. So So yeah, part of that is just that this should start like +1, right? So it would be that. And then the max minus the min is inclusive, which means that, you know, 3 and 2 would just be a span of 1. So even just this also, like both of these need to be +1 in a sense. I mean, maybe we don't really want to talk about it that way. So maybe we want to do this. And then when we're doing the T-stair displacement, maybe it's something like, well, it's really one stair step down. Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know how we want to parameterize this. I think we do want to do it this way. So we essentially say, look, it's a uniform set of steps. So you want to start on the first one. And you don't want it to finish. So you want it to look like that. I'm pretty sure that's what you want. And then you just say, what's the total height you want to do? And that's what you get, you know? That seems good, and that would allow us to connect. Like, we just need to make sure that actually allows us to hop all the way down, which I'm not sure if it will or not. We may need the stairwells to be a little longer vertically as well in order to actually hop down them. And looking at that, I don't know why that doesn't go down further as well. It seems like it's... So I don't know if the tile dimension... Yeah, I feel like the tile dimension isn't a radius. So I feel like this T-stair value should give us a value that's properly goes up to 1.4 as a downward displacement, which would bring us to the next floor height, right? I mean, that's what should happen. Because when we actually go to get where this thing is, it should, in theory, right? I mean, there's the tile dim. I mean, I could just say, look, that's the tile dim. It's right there. So whatever the downward distance is in general, that's what you would use with the T-stair value. And then this T-stair value should be smoothly varying. So I want to know why it's not. See what our T-stair values are. So that's exactly what I would have thought they should have been. So why are we getting such little displacement? I mean, that just seems really strange, right? I mean, I would have thought we would have seen a much more dramatic downward motion for such a big displacement. But for some reason, we aren't. And that doesn't really make a lot of sense. All right. So we've got some figuring out to do. I don't really know. Oh. So that time it did work correctly for some unknown reason. And it did create a stairwell down. All right, I must have run it prematurely. That's weird. So looking at this, when I want to go down there, right, I need now some way of making it so that when I hop down the stairwell, I can hop to things that are that low below me, and I at the moment can't. Like the restriction on the hop distance is, I think, too much there. Let me see what the let me see what we're actually looking at there in terms of how we decide to do that. So here we say get closest traversable with the hop target. So I guess I'm not sure why that wouldn't let us hop there. Are we, for some reason, not placing a traversable location on it? I mean, in theory, we should be here, right? So when we come in here and we add the floor tag, we're presumably going to add that traversable because, you know. So I'm not sure why that's not working. Let's take a look at get closest traversable and see. So looking in here, that's a long ray. Here's the one we'd actually be looking at here. So you can see in here we sort of have the problem of we want to be able to pick what the closest traversable is. And we don't really want to, we do want this to be in effect, right? We want to be able to hop to lower traversables, assuming that they are not too far outside of our range. So once we create this 2-point structure, you know, we do want this to be set probably this way for things that can go up and down like that. And we would say, well, you know, you can't go more than like half a meter or something. You know what I mean? So we'd say, well, all right, however much this thing is, however far away it is, we're going to clamp. I don't know why we were. I'm not really sure why we decided to do it quite that way with clamp above 0. There's a lot of ways we could have done this. But we're basically saying, look, once we take the delta between these two things, we want to say, let's not worry about the z as much. We want the closest thing in x and y. But the z, as long as it's within like a general range that's allowed, we're gonna let you hop there. So we kind of want to take that 2-point z and just say, look, it's that far. That's how far the z is. And we'll just say, like, this is not a closest distance. This is just a straight up requirement. It's got to be within this bracket. So if the 2-point z is less than whatever our bracket size is, like half a unit or something, then we go. And, you know, not exactly sure how we want to do that, but it's something like that. So, you know, you should be able to go to one of these if it's within that bracket. Now, I don't know how far that bracket actually should be. I don't know why I can't hop there. Must be some other bug here. What am I doing wrong there? When we're searching for the z, we should be able to bound the region in which we're testing the z, and that should have still included wherever that traversable was, right? We shouldn't have had any problem with that. So I'm not sure why it didn't like that. It seems to really not want to go on those stairs, and I'm not sure why, because they should have traversables. And in fact, if I drew them, I would be able to see them, right? I mean, if we basically said, I want to see the traversables, you know, show me the traversables. You know, I can see that they're there. And I know I can hop around down here. But I'm not sure why I can't get up onto that. Why I couldn't get onto any of these stairs. I don't know why. Gosh. So there's a bunch of weird things going on there. Let's go debug that. So when we search through all of these queries, we are testing all of the entities. You can see our to-do here of like, we probably shouldn't do that. But we're testing all of the entities to see which one's closest. And in theory, we should be able to bias it to always use X and Y closeness primarily. And then Z is just more like a clipping. Like we'll clip out anything that's not, you know, within a certain range of us, right? So in theory, we should have been able to say, like, you know, in fact, we don't even really need that. We can just say, look, if, you know, 2-point Z is, you know, greater than or equal to some negative bound and less than or equal to some positive bound, then we know we can take the distance not counting the Z, right? So then when we do our test distance squared, when we take the length squared of 2-point here, it should just give us the XY distance, not counting the pitch downward. So it won't defavor hopping down a stair just because it's further to go, you know, to go Z downward than it would be to not. And so I have no idea why it doesn't like that. You know what I mean? That doesn't really make a lot of sense. And so I would like to know why we're having that problem. And you know what I could do too to save ourselves the agony? Inside WorldGen, I can just put us in a different location at outset. So when we do all this generation and I'm like, what's the start room? Or where's the hero get placed or whatever, right? The result here for initial camera P, we can change the hero placement for that. Right? So I think what I would do there is say, let's take a look at the forest. So, you know, in the orphanage forest entrance, I can probably just say this. And then force the placement to be there instead. Right? Or maybe not. Can I not do that? We are generating a forest entrance, are we not? Yeah. So we should be able to set the initial camera P here to be the hero room like this, right? I mean, there's no reason we can't do that. But for some reason, it doesn't want us to do that. Let's find out why. So it looks like it couldn't actually add our entity for some reason. Like it wasn't able to actually put the hero in, which is interesting. I wonder why not. So here's the place where we actually do that. Oh, well, I mean, that's why. Get closest traversable. In this case, I guess we need a way of telling it in here not to do this clip, if that makes sense. So I'm curious, this get closest traversable, where it's saying traversable search unoccupied, interestingly enough, we don't obey it. Do we? Or I guess we do. But nobody passes that in. Does the other person who calls this pass it in? There's two places where it's called. Or I guess there's a couple of places where it's called. Weird. So in here where we say traversable search unoccupied, we say if the traversable search unoccupied flag is not set, we can do this. Or if the occupier is 0, meaning there's no one on it, we can do it. So that means in general when we search, interesting. So yeah, we don't search for that. Interesting. So normally we check after the fact, right? You can see them checking like the brain for the various things here. They check afterwards. Okay. So really, I feel like that should have been set. This flag should have been set on the other one, but I guess that's neither here nor there. Anyway, so I'm going to say something like, if we're going to clip Z, then we do this, otherwise we don't. So we say, you know, if this was not set, we can just do it. If it was set, we have to look here, right? And I probably don't want to do this in that case either. You know what I mean? So the 2..z equals 0, that probably shouldn't happen unless we're going to clip the z. So we'll do that. And off we go. All right, so I would argue in here, this really should have been passing that, I feel like. Yeah. So I think we're good now. That was just a little bit of a weird thing that was happening there. And so then inside the get close traversal for these, inside the brain when we ask for a hop, I think that's where we want to do the handmade, the clipped Z version. And I want to know why that's not working, because I have no idea why it's not working. That should have been something very unintuitive was happening here, because I should be able to hop to that one. So why can't I? You know what I mean? So I want to see what's going on there, because something's messed up severely if I can't hop to there. Because like at some point, if I set this large enough, there should be no way I could possibly not capture the distance between this one and the next one, right? So the fact that I still can't hop down there is absurd. Something's totally busted. So let's take a look at, let me just switch to debug mode now. And let me see what's going on there. So in this case, now I'm like forced going that way, right? And here's a question. Can I do this? If I want to turn on loop live code editing, can I just do like L? Yeah, maybe? No. Is the frame temporary arena not marked as unrestored? I think it might not be. Yeah, it's not. So the frame arena probably, in order to make loop live code editing be okay, the frame arena probably has to do that, because it's actually, you know, persisting across, and so it shouldn't probably be restored, because the temporary, it can't reload its temporary at that point. At least that would be my assumption. I can't think of any reason why you would want the frame arena to not do that. So I think in here we want that frame arena. Here we want the frame arena to be set to that mode. So game state frame arena flags. Actually don't remember what the flag is, but it's something like do not restore. It is, actually that's in the platform, isn't it? It's the non-restored memory pool that I want to emulate here. It's yeah, so when you create it, you do a non-restored arena. So it's really this. I'm assuming I could just set that. I don't see any reason why I couldn't. So inside the arena, where you've got the allocation flags, I think I can just set that. So like that memory is not restored. So let me see if I can make sure that that works properly. Oh, but you know what? The game state is going to get restored, so that temporary free lasting outside the frame is not great, right? Because the game state the game state has to line up with the arena temporary. That's tricky. So here's what I'll say. I think what I want to do there is make it not do that. So I think what I'd rather do is just set it that way. And instead of end temporary memory, like instead of this, I would say, let's just clear it every frame. Because that way we can just say, because we don't really want that participating in save restore ever. That would just be bad. So we'd rather just do this, I think. Because everything else seems to work just fine there. All right, so why would that be unhappy? And also, we don't care now whether it's restored or not. So shouldn't this be okay now? I guess I'd have to think about that. So since it's in the game state and we will restore its pointer, maybe this has to happen. We'll see. But I feel like now we should be able to get this to work. But because that is a sticking point, and I'm not sure how we would have that happen. So it doesn't want to do the clear, right? But I'm not sure why. Let's debug that too. So frame arenas, I do think we want them to be non-restored because I don't see why you would want that, right? And it's cleared always at the outset. So that's just how that happens. So I just want to know why. I want to know why it's having trouble with that restoration. The game state structure itself will have its state restored, right? Meaning like when we come in here, the frame arena, this game state struct, so, you know, this will have its state restored. And for some reason, the current block pointer gets borked there. When we go to clear it, you know, this memory is garbage. But I'm not sure why it was. Because it should just be set to whatever it was on that frame. I guess one question is, what happens when we what happens when we rewind our arenas here? So when we're reloading the process, when we're reloading the state for replay, we do have a problem where if we free a block, what's going to happen to that block when we reload it later? So here we go. When we begin recording, we come through here and we look at all of the source blocks that we've got and we write them all out and then we finish, right? When we need to play it back, we load them all and we load them at their locations. Why is that? That is what this is, isn't it? Why does it say that? I don't know. So it seems like that should be fine. What I would say there is it is a little bit weird. Do we just never deallocate blocks or something? Because there is a little bit of weirdness there, like in terms of like watching what gets allocated during looping and what doesn't. So when we begin recording our input here, you know, we're saying like, okay, go through all of these and look at what the memory blocks were at that particular time. And, you know, we save them out. I'm also not sure what that final, I guess that final null is just what lets us know we're done. So here we keep reading until we get a base pointer of 0. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that seems like that would be fine. The Win32 clear blocks by mask. I guess what I would say is when we're loading these back in, how do we do the mapping? So when we come in here and we say like, here's the saved memory block, so we get that thing. How does this even work? Because do we just prevent all memory block freeing during that process? I guess we do. So what happens when I do a Win32 allocate? So in here, we presumably set, yeah, allocated during looping, right? So we know whether this thing was allocated during looping or not. I'm going to go ahead and say that this creates sort of a problem for us because if the looping flag sets this, but we are a non-restored piece of memory, then this should really not be set. because it's going to be allocated or freed during looping. But it doesn't matter. Right? So where's the non-restored memory? I'm curious. Like, what are the memory flags we can set there? Not restored. So when we record the input, if something is not restored, then it doesn't get written here, right? But what's kind of busted is that when we do a free by mask, this is not good, right? I mean, I guess it's okay because non-restored would be set there. Maybe. But those are looping flags only. So it seems like you really don't want to actually do this, because if something was a non-restored block, then you really don't want it to be cleared, right? So I feel like that's just a bug in this system, where we want to make sure that when we're recording, you know, we play back what was supposed to happen, and that's all fine. But when we go to clear the allocated blocks, we need to make sure that anything that was not supposed to be restored should not get cleared. You know what I mean? So I feel like this has to respect that flag or something. I'm also not sure when we call Win32 to end input playback why we would anything that was freed during looping. We don't know that we're actually at the end. So this seems questionable to me. No, it's okay, because we're not talking about future ones. It will just free the ones that have been, yeah, okay, no, that's fine. So I think the problem here is just, yeah, like that freed during looping and the allocated during looping flags. I feel like that has to be respected. It has to respect, it has to respect the non-restored part of things, right? So if the memory type here, you know, I think we want to do something more like this, where we say if we're in the loop and we say that this is supposed to be restored, then we're going to do a looping allocate. But otherwise we're not, because it's non-restored memory. And then in here it would be the same way. So if the memory block in question has flags that indicate that we wouldn't restore it, then we don't want to do that. So Win32 block.flags. Or it's block flags, I guess. I think it's that. I think that's what we actually want to have happen there. And so that should happen. And then now I argue, as I said before, this should be a non-restored memory piece, right? So I'm not sure about that because that's a fairly complex system now. We should probably pull it out and get it a little bit more tested, but yeah. So now that frame arena is not causing us problems, which is good. I also want to make sure we're not getting a memory leak in there because that's pretty tricky now because it's like doing sort of this behind the scenes save restore stuff. So that looks leaky, right, to me. So I think that's still bad in that. I think that memory arena is still not quite right. So let's see here. Yeah, you know, that frame arena is supposed to have its allocation flag set to not restored. It's supposed to be able to clear itself. And I guess the other thing that I'm not sure about is, so the other problem with non-restored memory is I guess you really can't, the arena itself has to have its stuff restored or not restored as well. And that's another part that seems busted. Like, we would need some way of there of having the arena get like, we would need the arena's actual data itself to not be restored too. You know what I mean? So if you look at what would have to happen here, like this needs to be that, and it needs to be bootstrapped so that it's allocated in itself, right? If that makes sense. Because otherwise, like, you wouldn't, it just wouldn't work. So we kind of need to do something where the frame arena itself is put into the non-restored memory so that it can always actually be, like, non-restored. I know that sounds weird, but there's no other way to do it because otherwise the data for which blocks are in it is getting restored, but the blocks aren't getting restored. And we want the whole thing to be non-restored. It's running along with the frames, and it's just supposed to be that way, you know? So inside the memory system, where we do a bootstrap on, on that. So inside here, where we do a bootstrap push struct, this we should be able to just call directly. And the struct size is just going to be the size of the memory arena. The offset's 0. The params are non-restored arena. What are bootstrap params? Non-restored arena. So I think that's all we need. Right? So I think that's good. And then in here, right, we just need the frame arena is now pointer always. So you don't need to take the address of it, but everything else is fine. So that keeps everything in non-restored memory, and so I feel like that should work, and we should be able to verify that no one is touching that memory. don't really know what check arena does. Don't remember writing that. All right, that's a nonsense call. So we just cleared it. So let's see here. Moving on. Let's see if we can make that a little more stable now. And it should, I want to be able to actually have it so it doesn't leak that memory too. So when we are, let's see here. So frame arena, why isn't that getting initialized? Here we go. So in here, frame arena, that's supposed to be allocated here. So if not game state, that needs to be set up right away. So as soon as we get one of those, we need one of these. And why are we not initializing that? There we go. So here's the game state. Here's us bootstrapping it. There's the struct. There's the frame arena. Oh, wow. That's kind of dangerous. That just zeroed out the memory of that thing. Okay. So if we clear a memory arena, oh wait, no, that is what it should be doing, right? So it should be calling this. All right, so what was the problem? I guess that wasn't so dangerous. So what was the problem here? Come down here, say clear. The arena's fine. Oh, so in this case, if we were the one, we really don't want to clear up to that point. So I guess now we really do want the temp mem too, right? So here we would want to do end temporary memory. All right. So this is kind of tricky to get something that allocates across the frame boundary when you do your restore. Not so simple. There might have been a better way to do this if we added support in the system for it more directly, I suppose. So there is that. So we need to make sure we don't free the actual storage for the arena itself. That seems okay. And so I want to make sure to, let me let it run in optimized mode. I want to make sure that that's not leaky. Like I want to make sure that we didn't like mess up how we're managing that memory pool there, because it's very subtle. Much more subtle than anything else we were ever doing. So it looks like that's loaded everything and it's going to load. I don't see any leakiness there. So let me just see what happens if we do this. Okay, so now we're super stable. So that's good. All right, so that's good. So now I can actually do the thing I wanted, which is to see what was going on with that error there. And so maybe we can even do a thing where, all right, so if I do loop live code editing here, so we're just stuck in this loop. We're constantly trying to search for that thing. So I want to do the debug I actually want to do. So I'm going to recompile live code edit into debug mode. So now I think that's what's being run, right? And now go into sim region and then check for get closest traversable in debug mode and see why it's not finding a traversable in this case, right? So I want to see inside execute brain hero, this is what's going to happen. We're going to search for the hop target. So if we look at where we're looking to go, like this is where we're looking to go, right? I want to know why we're not like properly considering the z values there, or like what's happening, right? Like what's going on inside get closest traversable, such that we never get there. You know what I mean? So 2 point is the target under consideration. And in theory, right, like these z's, we should get to a point where these z's are more reasonable, right? So there's one with like a really steep, like these z's are all like wickedly far. We kind of, I feel like we're going to need something to narrow this down for us. Like, does it ever get here? That's kind of weird. So we do get in here, and if we look at what the 2 point value is, so it is a value that's close, in z, it's close enough. So what happens here when we do that? We zero out the z value. We do the length squared of this thing. So that's just going to be the x and the y values. And so we look at what that distance squared is, and we look at what the closest distance squared is, right? So we're going to take that one. And that looks like it's operating basically how I would have thought it would be operating. So if I look at the test distance squared there, there's an even closer one, right? If that's the hop target, what's the actual target? So this is slightly higher than the target. Anyway, this should end up being something like we should end up having one here that's really close. So let's see which ones get closer. So there's a 0. That's still quite a bit far away in y. Here's one that's like lower down than it, and we are accepting that move. So that's like to the left a little. right? I'm also going to set a breakpoint down here. So here's one that's right in front of us. I mean, that looks pretty good, right? However, its z value, oddly enough, is the same as the hop target. So that would suggest that is it actually... How is that possible? That seems like it should be impossible. Are we accidentally searching from like back some other location that's not where we're actually hopping from or something? I mean, we're taking the body position and we're adding the target Y. How was there one with a Z that matched our search Z? Like, that just doesn't add up for me. Right? Because what we saw there was that the traversable was like at the same place. Something's fishy. There's something... We're getting closer here, but something's weird. I don't know what's going on, but it's not good. Right? I'm going to turn off the loop. So something is happening where it actually thinks those points are at the same z level. Also, there's some weird stuff happening with Z as well. The actual, like, Z bias. That's a real puzzler. And I have no idea what's going on there. Because we shouldn't have seen, like, that was a totally bogus value. It's as if there was a traversable right there, and we know that there isn't because we're drawing the traversables as the purple squares there. So if there was one there, we should have seen it. And I don't get why. So how is it, what's going on? I'm super stumped right now, and I don't have any way to debug this. So I'm going to have to do something to simplify this down. I guess what I can do is only add traversables in just those two locations and nowhere else in the world. So, like, you know, I could change this to only allow traversables in just that one room. And only just in that location. Maybe. So here's one other thing I want to try. So let's suppose I didn't move the stairs at all. They're just not moved. I'm assuming I can still hop on them. Right? Is that true? So I can still hop across them just fine. If in here I set them to some smaller amount. So they're just gradual. That's allowed. If I set it to slightly more, now I can. So it's like the values that we think we're multiplying by are not actually the values or something. You know what I mean? It's like we're somehow setting like this stuff is not actually in the same space as we think it is, right? Because the difference in z between these, if it was 1.0, the entire difference here of the entire stairwell is only 1.4, right? So how we could actually have this not pick that up, I'm not sure. And there didn't seem to be anything we could set this to that would make it work either. That's just really, really weird. So what's the value that we actually have to do before it can't do it? That's just so bizarre. And like that's right at the edge where the amount of randomness involved actually makes it so I can't hop on these two stairs, but I can on this one. So is our stair height way higher than we like? How is this possible? It doesn't make any sense. This value here, we know what it is. Like we know it's 1.4. How is this happening? This is so bizarre. It's like complete ludicrousness. Something really just absolutely bonkers is happening here, and I have no idea what it is. That's going to drive me nuts. So a value of 0.25 is how much we are saying we're moving by. Of the tile dim z, which is supposed to be 1.4, that's 0.35, right? It moves up and down by another 0.5. So if you pick the absolute maximum you could do, it would be, I guess it would be 0.35 plus, well, even that, think about that for a second. How is that? That's almost the entire floor height. I must just have the floor, this value must be much larger than I think it is. What did I do wrong there? So tile dim z, what's going on here? So when we actually set this, oh, I'm in room gen. I'm like, why can't I find anything? So when we actually do this here and we say typical floor height, what does that do? So inside begin world gen is presumably where we would set this up. I looked at the wrong value. This entire thing could have been avoided if we just looked at that. So really, this is probably some other larger value for the tile depth in meters. Okay. So what is this value? When do we actually set that? Pass it in. Oh man, so the typical floor height is 5. This entire time. So I just misread that value. I don't know why. All right. Well, that was a waste of time. Although I guess we fixed the loop live code editing, so I'm happy that we did that. But okay. So when we want to do the Z range there inside sim region, this should really be more like 2, right? My lord. Okay. That was just unfortunate. All right. So since that was a bit of a disaster there, I'm going to go ahead and say, let's also do one more thing, which is let's find out why are we not... Is there a reason that we don't go down and kind of zoom further in to, like, is that actually how far away we should be from here? You know, I guess maybe it is, but I can't quite tell if we should be or not. And we need to set our alpha clipping so that when we come down here, it clips away as well. So I'm not sure what we want that to be set to exactly, but like our clip, our alpha clip near clip plane here needs to match that. You know? How far out is that stuff now? Seems like the answer is very far out. So the alpha clip here is based on what? That's a little strange because shouldn't the alpha clip value be, well, we'll see. So is the alpha clip stuff is based on the same setting as this or not? Like, I'm not sure what the alpha clip params actually refer to there in terms of when they kick in. So yeah, I'm not sure. But it does seem like those should have been parameterized off of the near clip plane, but it doesn't look like they were. So I'm not sure if that's like actually just something that kicks in some other way. You know what I mean? And it seems like that's also wants to be measured in pure Z as well. Kind of a separate issue. But this is pretty good now. I can actually explore down here. So, you know, I think that leaves me in good shape for tomorrow. Because then I can go do the camera stuff now, which is what I wanted. And I can work on the Clipsy, the fog, and the debug camera. And get that all looking proper. But this is much better now. And I can go up and down the stairs. And like you can see that, look, we want the Clipsy to clip things in a... The near clip plane and the alpha clip, those should actually be measured off of the camera Z this is actually should be measured off of the world Z, and this should be measured off of the world Z2, probably. So this is probably not what we actually want. Similarly, I don't know to what extent we care about this. It's like this should really be doing, like there's a bunch of stuff we want to do here. So in terms of getting the camera Z, I don't think we want a fog based on the camera Z. I think we actually want a fog based on the world Z. I think. And the alpha clip, we would want to do the same thing, I think. I don't really know. But I think this stuff is busted. Like, we want to change that measurement in the actual shader and get that stuff to work properly. I also think it seems like maybe we should be, like the camera doesn't seem to be moving very far down in here. And so it seems like maybe it's a little bit, as far as Z is concerned, it seems like it's just confused about how far offset it should be. And I don't know if that, I don't know if that's because when we do the room gen and we get how far away we're supposed to be, like maybe this is doing something dumb there. Like, we shouldn't really let it get set to such high values ever. I'm not super certain about that. And it looks like that would be more of an X count thing that's happening there. So it looks like it'd be one of these than one of these, but... So I'm not sure. I want to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2. So that is going to be a larger than 15 room. So I'm wondering if maybe these should still, like this maybe got up too high too fast. You know what I mean? So I want to take a look at that. I think maybe the displacement of the camera was a little too much. Because that still seems like that's still a little too far away, I feel like. So I wonder if, you know, maybe this should have been like this? I don't know. It seems like those values are just not right. Especially because this room at this scale doesn't even really need to scroll much, right? So it's kind of weird the way that was set up. Sorry I keep going here. I know I'm supposed to be finishing the stream, but just, you know, sometimes it's easy to get obsessive. So I think for the alpha clip here, I guess I don't know what that distance wants to be exactly in terms of where we start clipping, but I guess we want to clip something like, I don't know. Almost. So that seems really nice, and let me turn off the movement points too, because we don't really need those at the moment. Okay. And so, yeah. Seems like that works pretty seamlessly now. Of course, I don't really know what happened there. So it looks like that range needs to be maybe a little tighter. We probably also want to make it so the camera follows someone up and down the stairs so you don't get that problem. But yeah, that seems pretty good. All right. Let's go ahead and do brief Q&A, and then I'm gonna bow out until tomorrow. I mean, if we really wanted to make this spooky, we could turn off the moonlight too, right? Like... Trying to load the complete set of V0 HHA's dataset with the latest GitHub Handmade hero code, but doesn't work. So did you actually use the HHA editor? Right? Did you actually do HHA edit minus rewrite and move them all to V2s like I did? Like, you got to do this. Those are V0s, so you got to do rewrite and then the HHA in question, like, you know, that, and then you have to do to update them. We'll ship a complete version as soon as I'm done with this, but we're kind of in the middle of that now, so I'm not going to constantly update those files, if that makes sense. But, so you need to use HHA edit to bring them in. I will probably soon try to get to the point where we rebuild all of our assets with one call. Because we can do that now, but what's the status on the Radimer? Ask Alan. I have no idea. I haven't seen it. Head just clipped into the wall. If I saw correctly, do you plan on doing Z-buffer tricks to keep sprites from being hidden by 3D geometry? Yeah, we already actually did that, but we had like. When we updated our sprite code, I'm kind of holding off on that to decide exactly what goes on here. So if you look inside the entity code here, we do our computation of where everything is, and then we do the push sprite call here on the scaled axes. And then if you go into the push sprite call, you can see that it doesn't use any Z-bias, right? Now, if we did use some Z-bias, it would work temporarily anyway. So, for example, if we just, you know, said that and allowed there to be some Z-bias in there, we could set that value to something that would fix it, right? But you can see, like, there's a bunch of stuff we have to account for. In this case, we want these to be proportional to how much is actually going on, and we need to like set them per sprite so that sprites stack on each other and other kinds of stuff like this, right? We also don't want to use that for fogging, probably. Hard to say, but you can see we sort of already did solve the problem in a certain sense, but we haven't gone and spent the time to tune all that to work properly. But the renderer does know how to do it. So it already has the ability to work with that code. Ooh. Oh, I forgot. We gotta get rid of the head thing there. Oops. Oh man, we actually have an area that would have more than 4,096 entities. Really? We're getting into beef territory, I guess. Youch. But anyway, yeah. So that's what's happening in there. So what we want to do eventually when we go to clean that code up is we're going to decide like how this stuff is actually going to get set, and we're going to pass it in from outside. Can you explain the difference between heap alloc and virtual alloc, and for what scenario they are appropriate? Yeah, so I guess I couldn't really tell you why heap alloc exists, really. So here's the function that's are being asked about. You've seen virtual alloc. We don't call this one. And I wish I knew what the point of it was. I really don't. It's basically giving you access to a malloc style thing. You can do heap alloc and you can do heap free, and it will actually try to handle allocating and freeing memory for you. And I have never really used them. Every process in Windows has one of these, and I don't know what the point of it is. I'm assuming that the point of it is maybe for the operating system to be able to interchange memory with you on the heap, but it never really does that. There probably are some calls that do. But this is basically like a little memory allocator that runs in there, backed by virtual alloc, right? So this is kind of like a utility, you could almost think of it, that allows you to do allocs and frees on top of a virtual alloc that you didn't have to call yourself, that the process actually manages for you. And to be honest, I don't know what the point of it is. I really don't. I wish I could talk more intelligently to the reason why Windows thought it should be in there. I'm sure they had a good reason. I don't know what it was at the time. Virtual alloc, on the other hand, is actually the thing that interfaces with the memory page table for your process. And that's what you actually need to use to allocate memory. So when you call heap alloc and heap free, you're not actually going to be mapping memory pages in. You're going to be going through an intermediary who will map pages or not. So it's like a one removed, right? You're going to say, allocate some memory. It's going to say, okay, do I need to virtual alloc or not? If I do, I will. If I don't, then I won't, right? I might just give you a portion of memory I already mapped. So for our purposes, we don't need that really. So because we do these calls very infrequently. So we use virtual alloc directly because that's the thing that actually sets up. There we go. That's the thing that actually maps memory pages into your process. So it's the actual memory allocator in some sense, you could say, that gives you a page directly or set of pages. So this is really a thing that this is what actually maps pages in the virtual address space to your process and says I'm actually going to use some memory now. Virtual acts like a utility that would work on top of that, and I don't really know why you would want to use it. You'd want to use it if the OS, if in order to interact with a particular OS function, it was going to want to take a heap alloc page that it can free or something, right? What kind of allocation do you use for your assets? Well, there's a couple kinds. So there's texture memory that gets allocated for assets, and we move it into there. Then we use, for the storage of the actual, like, things that don't go into texture memory, like sound, we just use a, you know, we have a set of virtual allocs that allocate pages for us, and we put them in there. So they're just virtually alloced and then pushed on as like a stack. What does the on-lamp variable represent? So we have, like, I turned off the putting of lights in the world, so it doesn't do that right now. Like, there are no other lights in the world besides the one that you're carrying and the moon. But if you actually looked at the code for rooms, you can see that, like, we had some code to set up some lamps in the corners of rooms. And so if you actually, like, turn that back on, then each of the rooms has, like, a lamp, a bright spot in the corner where there is a lamp. That's just putting light in there. Right, so now when we walk down here, it's not dark. Like, there's lamps in the corners. There's no point to it. I mean, we were just playing around. And so that's all that is. And the lamps were, like, variably colored. You can see how some of them are, like, more green or more red or whatever, right? That was it. It doesn't do anything else. And so, you know, it turned out that just wasn't very interesting. So I kind of just turned it off and forgot about it. Yeah, and that was it. All right. I'm gonna close it down. Thank you everyone for joining me for an episode of Handmade Hero. It's been a pleasure coding with you as always. If you would like to follow along with the series at home, you can always pre-order the game on handmadehero.org, and it comes with a source code so you can play around with it yourself. I will be back here tomorrow, and I think we'll play with the camera a bit tomorrow. That's what I want to do today, but we kind of had a bunch of other stuff that kind of came up, and so I wanted to go. I was more interested in doing some of those other things, and also setting it up so we could walk downstairs and stuff, so that way we can look at the, like, camera alpha and other things like that we might want to edit. So we'll be back to do that, and we'll probably also want to start down the road of doing the text files for asset metadata too. So we've got plenty to do this weekend. Hope to see you back here for that. Until then, have fun programming, everyone, and I'll see you on the internet. Take it easy, everybody.